Hi you guys, in the last video lesson we learned all about classifying real numbers, and we talked about the fact that if a number is a rational number it can be written as a fraction. And so in this video lesson I am going to review with you how to turn numbers into fractions. Okay, so if it's a whole number, we talked about that you would put it over 1. But we need to talk about how to change a decimal or a percent into a fraction, and then also how to change fractions into decimals and how to change percents into fractions. Okay, so we are going to work on that. Here we go. Okay, so just as a review from earlier grades, the number 1 or 1.0 or 100%, these are all of equal value. So even though they are in different forms, they're still of equal value. So 1/2 and 0.5 and 50%, those are all equal to each other. They're just different forms of the same number. Okay, so here are some common ones. Besides 1/2, 1/4 is another common one. You're going to see this quite often this year. So 1/4 is the same as 0.25, and that's the same as 25%. 1/3 is actually a repeating decimal of 0.33 repeating, or 33 1/3%, or you can say 33.3 repeating percent. Another common one would be 1/5. The decimal equivalent for 1/5 is 0.2, and that is equal to 20%. And then another one would be 1/10, which is equivalent to 0.1 or 10%. So here are just some common ones. If you have forgotten how to change a fraction to a decimal and then to a percent, let's take some notes about that. Okay, so take out a piece of paper, make sure you have something to write with, and you need to have some notes about how you can write a fraction as a decimal, and how you can write a decimal as a percent, and how you can write a percent as a fraction. Because in this class, you need to be able to go between the 3 different versions of the same number. Okay, so when you are writing a fraction as a decimal, okay, you take the fraction and you divide the numerator, which is the top of the fraction, by the denominator. Okay, so to change a fraction into a decimal, you're going to divide the numerator by the denominator. To write a decimal as a percent, you're going to multiply by 100. And to write a percent as a fraction, a percent is always out of 100. Okay? Now let's go ahead and look at a few examples for this. Let's say we have the fraction 3/4. If we want to change 3/4 into a decimal, we're going to divide the numerator by the denominator. So the numerator of our fraction is 3, the denominator is 4. So what I do is I take the 3, I divide by 4. Okay, now you guys know that you cannot divide 3 by 4. Okay, so we'd have to add a decimal, bring the decimal straight up, and a 0. Now we can say that 4 goes into 30 7 times. 7 times 4 is 28. 30 minus 28 is 2. Add a 0, bring a 0 down, and then 4 goes into 25 times. 5 times 4 is 20. So when I divide the numerator by the denominator, I get 0.75, the decimal value of 0.75. Okay, now if we want to go from a decimal to a fraction, the way that we're going to do that is we're just going to use place value. So we're going to say the decimal number using place value, and then we're going to write it. So if we were to look at this number right here, 0.4, 4 is in the tenths place. Another way to say 0.4 is 4/10. So we say it and then we write it. 4/10. Okay. Now, this fraction of 4/10 can be simplified. That's how we get to the 2/5. 2 divides into 4 twice, and 2 divides into 10 5 times. So when we simplify 4/10, we get 2/5. Okay. So to go from a fraction to a decimal, a fraction is really just a division problem. You divide the top number by the bottom number. And to go from a decimal to a fraction, you use place value. You say it, and then you write it. Okay, now, when you are writing a fraction as a decimal, okay, there are a few different things that may happen. When you do the division of the top by the bottom, you may get a decimal that ends, that terminates. We call this a terminating decimal. For example, when we divided 3 by 4, we got 0.75, and that's it. Okay, that's a terminating decimal. When you take 2 and you divide by 3, let me show you what happens. 3 can't fit into 2, so I'm going to add a decimal and a 0. I'm going to bring the decimal straight up. 3 goes into 20, though, 6 times. 6 times 3 is 18. 18 minus 20 is 2. I have a remainder, so I'm going to add a 0, bring a 0 down. 3 goes into 20 6 times. 6 times 3 is 18. I subtract. 20 minus 18 is 2. I have another remainder. I'm going to add a 0, bring a 0 down. 3 goes into 20 6 times. 6 times 3 is 18. When I subtract, I get 2. Can you guys see what's happening here? This decimal is called a repeating decimal. As you add zeros and bring them down, you're always going to get 6. This is a repeating decimal of 0.66. So a terminating decimal is when the decimal ends. A repeating decimal is when the decimal continues to repeat. Now remember, if your decimal does not terminate or it doesn't repeat, if it's a never ending, never repeating decimal, we would know that that is an irrational number. Okay, so rational numbers either have a terminating or repeating decimal. If the decimal never repeats or never ends, just as a review, we would call that an irrational number. Okay, there is one more thing I want to talk to you about, and then I'm going to have you do a couple of different assignments in ALEKS. Okay, now, you can see up here that you have 2 sets of instructions. One of them says change each mixed number to an improper fraction. The other one says change each improper fraction to a mixed number. So these are both skills that you need to have in order to complete your ALEKS assignment. So if you're going to change a mixed number to an improper fraction, let me remind you how to do that. Okay, if you have 3 1/2 and you want to change this to an improper fraction, you take the denominator, so 2, you multiply by the whole number of 3, and then you add the numerator. So 2 times 3 is 6. 6 plus 1 is 7. So 3/2 written as an improper fraction would be 7/2. Okay. B, if we want to write 1 2/3 as an improper fraction, we do 3 times 1 is 3 plus 2 is 5. That would be 5/3. C, we would do 5 times 2 is 10. 10 plus 4 is 14/5. You guys see how this works? This should be a review for you. If it's not, please come talk to me and I'll get you some more practice with this. to change 1 3/4 to an improper fraction. We do 4 times 1 is 4. 4 plus 3 is 7. 7/4. E, 10 times 8 is 80. 80 plus 3 is 83/10. F, 8 times 5 is 40. 40 plus 3 is 43/8. Okay, so to go from a mixed number to an improper fraction, you take the denominator, you times by the whole number, you add the numerator. Now, to go the other direction, to go from an improper fraction to a mixed number, you divide the top number by the bottom number, and then you put the remainder on top. Okay, so let me clear off some space here. Sorry, I had to remember where my eraser was. Okay, so if we want to change 9/2 into a mixed number, what we do is we take the 9, we divide by 2. 2 goes into 9 4 times. 4 times 2 is 8. 9 minus 8 is 1. So we can write this as 4 and 1 over 2. We can write our remainder over what we're dividing by. Okay, let's look at 10/3. We would take the 10, we would divide by 3. If we're wanting to write this as a mixed number, 3 goes into 10 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. 10 minus 9 is 1. So 3 and 1/3. Okay, 15/4. We take the 15, we divide by 4. 4 fits into 15 3 times. 3 times 4 is 12. 15 minus 12 is 3. So 3 and 3/4. Okay, 35/10. I'm going to write that up here. 35 divided by 10. 10 fits into 35 3 times. 3 times 10 is 30. 35 minus 30 is 5. So this would be 3 and 5/10. 5/10 can be simplified to 1/2. So we would write this as 3 1/2. Okay, 22/8. 22 divided by 8. 8 goes into 22 twice. 2 times 8 is 16. 22 minus 16 is 6. So 2 and 6/8. 6/8 is a fraction that can be simplified. 6 and 8 have a common factor of 2. 2 goes into 6 3 times. 2 goes into 8 4 times. So this would be 2 and 3/4. Okay, and then the last one, 32/5. Looks like I have some space right here. So 32/5. 5 goes into 32 6 times. 6 times 5 is 30. 32 minus 30 is 2. So we could write this as 6 and 2/5. Okay, so when we're talking about fractions and changing mixed numbers to improper fractions, remember you take the denominator, you multiply by the whole number, and then you add the numerator. And if you're wanting to change an improper fraction to a mixed number, you divide the top by the bottom. Okay? Now, at this point, there are a couple of ALEKS assignments that I would like you to work on. Okay, the 2 ALEKS assignments that I want you to work on are converting fractions to decimals and then converting decimals to fractions. Okay, so as a reminder, remember if you are going to convert a fraction to a decimal, okay, you divide the top number or the numerator by the bottom number. Okay, when you do that, you're either going to get a decimal that ends, so we call that a terminating decimal, or you're going to get a decimal that repeats, which we call that a repeating decimal, or if the decimal does not repeat or does not end, that is called an irrational number. Okay, you are also going to do the ALEKS assignment converting decimals to fractions. Okay, so when you're converting decimals to fractions, you say it, using place value, then you write it, okay, and then you simplify. So if this fraction can be simplified after that, you always simplify the fraction. So at this point, I want you to go complete those 2 ALEKS assignments. When you are done with those ALEKS assignments, take a screenshot of the report showing your name and showing that you finished it at 100%. Your ALEKS assignments always have to be done at 100%. ALEKS will allow you to rework the problem until you get it right, okay? And as you're working through your ALEKS assignment, if there are any that you can't figure out or you need help with, please, please, please come ask me, okay? I'm here and I'm available and I want to help you. So with that said, go ahead and get those 2 ALEKS assignments. Submit your completed report when you are done and move to the next video lesson in Canvas, where we are going to talk about how to change a percent to a fraction and a fraction to a percent.